Gang. 6ix9ine? More like sexual misconduct with a minor? What's that, YouTube? You don't like that? That's a bit of a sensitive subject. You're gonna demonetize this video? Is that what that is? Is that what that is? Miss me with that. Welcome back to another episode of Worst Rappers in the Game, where we will be looking at Daniel Hernandez, also known as 6ix9ine, aka Mr.
Yo, the bitch, yo, let me use your phone. Yo, you talking crazy, she like, yo, what you mean,
So, to get an opinion on his music, I listened to the Scummy Scumz mixtape, F the Haters, and Day 69, which ironically has a track list that sounds kinda like a baby trying to say its first words. You know, ironic because he was charged with sexual misconduct with a minor. So, is 6ix9ine one of the worst rappers in the game based purely off of his music? This is CDTVProductions, and let's find out. And in the first segment of this lovely little series, we will be looking at his voice. So, 6ix9ine is quite a shouty bloke. I think that's quite clear to anyone who listens to his music. And I have quite a lot to say about this, as this is kind of his go-to delivery. I have to say, his loud, aggressive voice really works best on the tracks with the hardest beats. When his producers can make a beat with some real power behind it, that is when his voice really contributes to the excitement of the track. The best example of this for me is the strong opening track Billy from his Day 69 project.
She a freak hoe, fucker, she on beast mode. On your back, put your hands on your knees, ho. I'm on beast mode, shoot you through your peephole. Said he won't smoke, I don't really see it though.
6ix9ine's shouting actually works exceptionally well on that kind of dramatic beat. Other songs that show this quite well are Kooda and Dewey. Yeah, I know, haha, he says Kooda and Dewey funny, ha. Those are tracks where his vocal style fits in. However, this particular type of delivery he favors really limits his versatility. One thing you'll notice on his Day 69 mixtape is every single track has the same delivery from Tekashi, with some differences that are only really subtle throughout. This really decreases the sounds that he can pull off, and that's a shame. Nothing illustrates this better than the track Keke, which features Fetty Wap and A Boogie. 6ix9ine sounds out of place on his own song, because Fetty and A Boogie's styles fit the track's aesthetic way more.
Baby, I ain't a hot boy, I'm a block boy. Double trigger Glock, make him diddy bop boy. Nigga, we be busting up the umps on the regular. Nigga, we be ducking from the cops on the regular.
That type of track doesn't call for shouting. This was an issue I also noticed whenever Tekashi did a feature on a Trippie Redd song. On the songs Ooey and Pulse 1469, Trippie opts for a more tranquil sound, which matches the tone of the beat, and 6ix9ine's boisterous screaming just isn't compatible with these tracks. That's my main problem with his delivery. Whilst it does contribute to the hype of some tracks, it's so limiting. I think I can understand why he goes for this delivery though. If you listen to tracks such as 69 or Pimpin', where he uses his regular voice, you'll notice that he doesn't have a bad voice necessarily. It's just completely unremarkable. The shouting is clearly kind of a gimmick to stand out from the crowd. I understand why he does it, but he does it so much that it'll be stale by the time his next project rolls around. Also, if you want a good laugh, listen to the auto-tune section of the song Inferno. It's laughably bad. I'm gonna give 6ix9ine a 2.5 out of 10 here. This delivery can work wonders on certain tracks. Billy is going on my hype playlist, but there's so many issues that stop me from giving him a higher score here. And for our second segment, we will be looking at 6ix9ine's flow. Now, if I'm being honest, I'd have to start this off by saying that 6ix9ine has a really by-the-numbers flow most of the time. It's an issue he had earlier on in his career, and it's an issue that definitely has continued through to the present day. You can hear this on songs like Helsing Station, which is a song I'm going to talk a bit more about later, But on that song, his flow just stands out as nothing special, especially when he's rapping next to someone like Zillakami, who actually has a pretty nice flow on that song. Most of the time, his flow doesn't offer anything innovative or exciting. And a lot of the time, when he's rapping and manages to catch a good flow, he sticks with that flow for so long that you get bored of it. This happens on the track Oof.
Yo, bitch, I'm wild and fresh off the island. My bitch a tie, I'm tweaking. That bitch is geeking, her pussy leaking. 40, I got that 40.
He only has 2 flows on that verse, and only the second one is really nice, and he sticks with it for too long. Also, an incredibly minor issue, but something worth bringing up is why the hell did you use the same flow on Gummo and Kooda? Gummo was a huge hit that really introduced you to so many people, so why would you use the same flow on your very next hit song? Sure, it's a catchy flow, but it kinda sets people up to think that you can't think of new flows already. Now, this has been a mostly negative segment so far, I know, Party Pooper Productions over here, but he has impressed me with his flow sometimes. He surprised me a little bit on 93, where he didn't necessarily use a complex flow, but it was definitely different to what he normally does.
Boy, you gon' get exposed, boy. Pull up with the Glocks out, red dots out, pull the mops out, and the chops out, niggas in out, go all out. When we back out, that's a blackout, shoes on go, they don't clock out.
This also happens on the following track, Dewey. And then I guess his flow is quite good on the song Go Crazy, but it sounds quite messy on there. There are some instances where he'll surprise me with a flow that isn't completely by the numbers, but that doesn't happen as often as I'd like it to. I'm gonna have to give 6ix9ine a 3.5 out of 10 for his flow. Out of all the big artists that have came up recently, he definitely doesn't excel past them in flow. Flow is probably the easiest thing for him to improve though, so I hope he does so in his future music. Oh, and for part 3, yay, we got the big old fun one, it's the lyrics. 6ix9ine is a rapper who embodies style over substance. When I say style, I mean, I don't necessarily mean artistic style, I mean having multicolored dreads and a quirky animated mixtape cover over substance. I mean, seriously, what can I say about this? It's hard to find a track where he's not talking about his gang being the hardest, shooting holes through other people, or making women gushy. I mean, there's genuinely nothing here. I scanned through almost every lyric he's laid down, and honestly, put a hole in his head, he's a dolphin, is the closest thing to a bar that he has ever laid down. On quite a few songs, he even actually uses single syllable rhymes, and that is an issue for me because even the most basic rappers in the world know how to use some form of multisyllabic rhyming, which 6ix9ine does do sometimes. I'm not saying he always does single syllable rhyming, but tracks like Sinaloa, Buba, and Shinigami are just next level simplistic. 6ix9ine scores a 1 out of 10 for lyrics. That's it. And for our next part, we will be looking at his beat selection. So 6ix9ine has decent beat selection in my opinion. I mean, the beats are mostly what made Day 69 really listenable. For example, on tracks like Keke, where I don't necessarily love 6ix9ine's delivery on it, the beat makes it incredibly catchy and has made it stick in my head a lot more than I want it to. There's also a fantastic beat on Rondo, and one I love, even though it's not really suited to 6ix9ine's style, is on the song Chocolate.
On that type of time for my woody, that's my fucking slime. On that type of shit for the bloody, you get crucifix. Better come and quit. We got
I think the instrumental there is crazy good. Like the bass line, the synths, the vocal sample, it all combines to make this beat that I think sounds really great. 6ix9ine's hook does make it a bit cluttered, but just as a beat on its own, I think it's very well done. And if you want to hear a very strong beat from earlier on in his career, I'd recommend checking out the song I mentioned earlier, Helsing Station. My god, the beat on that is hard. It has this cold underground sound to it, and I didn't expect something like that. One of the best beats he's ever used. However, speaking about his beat selection earlier in his career, it's not all that great at all, really, when you take it as a whole. Yes, songs such as Helsing Station and Scum Life have very good and hard beats, but the majority of the time, his early beats just sound like generic trap. For example, the beat on Pimpin'. It really sounds like the most generic style of trap beat around to me.
Shut up, hold your pussy thick. Smack her fast and she could blink. Pimpin' shine and kiss my ring. No shirt underneath them.
No offense intended to those who produced for Tekashi early on, but the beats from earlier in his career just don't sound original enough. Then if we move back to the current day, there's also some beats I don't like, even though he does have more of a defined production style now. For example, Gummo is a beat that's not awful on its own, but mixed with 6ix9ine's style, I cannot stand it. I don't understand how anyone thought this. I don't even think the beat was originally made for him. I was just about to say, like, who thought this beat would sound good with his voice? The kind of eerie, mysterious sound that the beat has to it does not fit 6ix9ine's in-your-face style at all. I don't understand how that's his biggest hit. It's probably one of my least favourite songs from him. I can't listen to it. And some other current beats of his that I don't really like are Buba and 93, just because of that obtuse bass. Overall, I'm gonna give 6ix9ine a 6.5 out of 10 for his beat selection. It is definitely better nowadays. Some songs like Kooda and Keke are fantastically produced, but he sometimes picks beats that do not gel well with him. And remember, we're taking this as a whole over the 3 projects I heard from him. Most of his earlier beat selection was so tired and is already outdated, so that's why his score is lower than a 7. And for part 5, we're just going to be looking at my enjoyment of 6ix9ine's music as a whole. So as stated at the start of the video, I listened to Scummy Scumz, F the Haters, and Day 69 to get an opinion on 6ix9ine. Out of all of these, my favourite was definitely Day 69, even though that's still not a great project. I liked it the most. The production was pretty nice throughout with some fantastic beats, and 6ix9ine did give some good performances on here. And I did get a few songs that I like out of it, such as Billy, Rondo, Keke, Kooda, and Chocolate, although that last one is mainly for the beat. As for Scummy Scumz, my enjoyment of this was significantly less. The beats were not unique or special in any way, and the only kind of interesting thing about it was hearing 6ix9ine's real voice. But that's it. Then F the Haters was more of the same as Scummy Scumz. The instrumentals were slightly better, the production was a little bit better, but other than that, it was more of the same. Still nothing that's gonna bring me back to that tape. Overall, I'm gonna give 6ix9ine a 3.5 out of 10 for my enjoyment, with most of that enjoyment stemming from Day 69. And a lot of that enjoyment also really does come from his producers, and sometimes the features. But I can say that I'm happy I got some songs out of this to listen to in the future. So, overall, Mr. 13-year-old ass slapper, and no, that's not an accusation, that did actually happen, check out my video on it. He scores a 17 out of 50, placing him in the 12th spot in my worst rappers in the game list. This positions him very slightly above 21 Savage and below Lil Uzi Vert. Of course, if you want to check out the whole list so you can complain to me about it in the comments, the full list will be in the description. 6ix9ine does have some very catchy songs, but when that happens, I mainly have to give credit to the producers. He has a lot to work on. Well, thank you so much for watching, guys. That is another episode in my flagship series, Worst Rappers in the Game, out. I'll have another one of these coming soon, hopefully. I always say that and they never come soon, but as you can see by this Fantastic video. It's always worth it. There's always quality here. There's always quality on the CDTV channel. So if you, I just messed up my words there, but if you want to see all of that quality, click the subscribe button, because that quality is coming not every day, because I don't upload every day, but a lot of the time during the week. You can follow me on Instagram under the name CDTVProductions. I'm just happy to have another one of these out. Let me know in the comments what you think of 6ix9ine. If you want to, let me know what you would rate him for each one of my worst rappers in the game segments. And that's all I got to say for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. And this is CDTV Productions with the dog slippers signing out.